Thank you for joining us for this podcast. I'm Dr. Sustainability. Wales has gone for a transition in terms of sustainability. There has been a prominent act called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act operating in Wales for 10 years. I thought it would be a timely point to have a conversation now with the Commissioner of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Love to see you. So to start off, could you give us an overview of the Act?
So the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is pioneering legislation. As you say, it's been in place in Wales for 10 years now. It came about, first of all, as a result of something called the Wales We Want national conversation. So people coming together asked about the future that they wanted for Wales as a country. So people were very closely involved in the development of the legislation. And it sets out a long-term vision for the country. So where do we want to go? And these are set out as our 7 wellbeing goals. And how are we going to get there? And these are the 5 ways of working which we require our public bodies to conduct and behave according to those 5 ways of working in order to deliver on this long-term ambition. And we've got a framework of measures. So we've got 50 indicators of success to tell us whether we're working towards the ambition that we've set ourselves. So this happened 2015, which is when the UN agreed the Sustainable Development Goals. So also this was part of Wales putting in place its plan to deliver on the SDGs. And I think we're the only country in the world still to have legislated for the SDGs.
Okay. So with that process, for the Wales that we want, how did that take place? Was that across the whole of Wales?
Yeah, so a conversation was organised right across Wales in different formats to ask people what they wanted for the future of the country. And it's really important that, because that's put down, I think, some firm foundations for the legislation. And it's also set out one of the ways of working. So one of the ways of working is involvement, and involving people in long-term decisions that will affect them and their children and their grandchildren, and making sure that we continue to talk to people about the future they want for the country and about the decisions that we're taking. So our public sector organisations, our councils, our health boards, NRW, national organisations in Wales are required to speak to the people of Wales about the decisions that they're taking to make sure we hear from people and listen to their concerns and act on them. Okay.
Now thinking about, obviously, that conversation of the Wales that we want and the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals came from the UN and they're set in terms of 17 goals. How do they work in synergy of the Wales that we want and the conversation that was had there?
So we have put in place 7 wellbeing goals. So we don't have the 17 that they have at the UN level. And you can map our 7 wellbeing goals to the 17 that exist at the UN level. So that's how we have framed it. And we have very much wanted to show that this is part of an international approach, but it's Wales's way of delivering on that longer term agenda globally.
Okay. And that was obviously 10 years ago. What has happened so far in terms of the Commission, in terms of progress made? Who is involved in terms of the actual legislation in place?
Yeah, so I should have said that. So who's involved in the legislation? So it applies to the public sector in Wales. Perhaps if devolution had been different, the Welsh Government at the time might have applied it to the third sector and to the private sector, but it applies to the public sector. And at the moment, there are 56 public bodies that fall under the legislation. They're obliged to put in well-being plans and objectives to show how they are delivering on the legislation, and that includes the Welsh Government. They're not excluded from this. They're
part of it.
They're very much. Absolutely. They're very much part of this, along with all the other public bodies like local authorities and health boards and Qualifications Wales and all the other public body institutions. And I think a crucial part of the approach that we've got in Wales is my role as Future Generations Commissioner. So the Future Generations Commissioner role is independent of government, and you're there to advise public bodies on their delivery, to monitor their progress, to undertake investigations, to look at particular issues and understand how we can make further progress. And the Auditor General for Wales also has a role in assessing the performance and delivery of public bodies and undertaking examinations. And he gives his view on the progress made by public bodies as well.
Thinking about how many organisations are involved, it sounds quite diverse. How do you pull them all in, even though they're operating very, very differently?
Yeah, so that's a great question in terms of collaboration and working together. We've got collaboration as one of the ways of working, and we expect our public bodies to collaborate and work together to deliver on these ambitions, because we know we won't deliver on them if we work in isolation. And we also expect integration, another one of the ways of working. So looking at things in a connected way, looking at policies and issues in a connected way, not just separately. So that's a crucial part of how we do this. And we also have got some structures set up by the legislation. So not to get sort of too detailed, but we have something called public service boards, which on a local or a regional level, so they're regional, some of them have merged, these public sector organisations are obliged to come together, put together collective plans to deliver on the goals that we've set as a country.
In terms of the 5 ways of working, are there any key ways that people prefer to follow than other ways?
Well, they're obliged to demonstrate all the 5 ways of working. And some public bodies are better at some of them than others. So shall I explain what the 5 ways of working are? So there's involvement. So as I've talked about, involving people in decisions. There's collaboration. So that means public bodies working together. There's integration. So that's looking at issues together rather than, in isolation. So health and its connections to culture and health and its connections to the economy. There's long term. Clearly, we need to be thinking long term. This is all about a long term agenda, not just looking to the next year, but looking, 5, 10, 15 decades ahead. And then the final one is prevention. So preventing problems from arising before they happen, rather than just dealing with the problems as they arise, getting ahead of things, so that we can, which is often obviously better for people and also can save money if we prevent problems arising in the first place.
So they align with the wellbeing goals. Could you talk us through the wellbeing goals?
Right. So 7 wellbeing goals tell us where we want to go. They describe where we want to go.
The Northern Stars.
Yeah, exactly. The North Star. And then the 5 ways of working are how we behave to get there. And the 5 ways of working, I think, are, really at the heart of the legislation, because it's those behaviours that will get us to where we need to go. So they're about how we're going to do it, the behaviours we expect public bodies to show when they're delivering on the legislation. So that brings them all together. And so we have 7 wellbeing goals, and you're going to test me now in terms of...
I won't put you to the test.
Yeah, but they're all online. So that, for example, there'll be one on a prosperous Wales, which is very much around the economy. But that's interesting in itself, because a prosperous Wales doesn't talk just about traditional forms of measurement like GDP. It looks about how we create a prosperous Wales that benefits us all, that doesn't do damage to the environment. So that's interesting. Globally responsible Wales is another one of the goals. So this is about Wales playing its part in making sure we do the right thing for people here, but also don't damage the interests of generations and future generations in other countries.
That's one of the goals I quite like, because I think that connects back into the UN in terms of being responsible on a global level. Because I think sometimes when organisations and countries look at it, they think, well, insular, this is us, this is what we're doing. But that really, your role and your impact goes far beyond just your border controls.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting part of it. And it does make a difference. So if you will looking at examples, sometimes it's nicer to talk about some examples. In Monmouthshire, some of the school children in the county there have been looking at school food and where that food comes from. And they've committed to having deforestation-free meals. So they're not having food on the menu in Monmouthshire schools that's causing deforestation around the world. So, it's a very tangible goal. It's not just wishful thinking. It's influencing decisions that our public bodies are taking in terms of their everyday operations, such as school food.
So we have like 7 wellbeing goals, 5 ways of working, and we have X amount of organisations operating in this space. In reality, what really happens?
Yeah, so that's the key question. What difference does it make? What impact does it make? So we've got all this process about putting plans in place. It's a good time to be asking that question because 10 years after the legislation, people are rightly asking, what impact does this make? And you can track back to some really important decisions that have been taken in Wales in the name of this legislation. Now, it's really just because of this legislation. This legislation operates a framework, a vision for the country, and there are always other factors to play. But if you look at our new curriculum in Wales, and I've had a briefing on this recently, you can see some of the changes to that curriculum have been done to align to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So eco-literacy in schools, changing the history we teach our children and so forth. If you look at our transport policy, similarly, we're clearly not there where we need to be in terms of our transport policy, but there's been a big shift in investment towards sustainable transport in trains in particular. And you can see many of these examples at the Wales-wide level and at the local level as well. So it is making a big difference. But my job is to be. Well, I'm frustrated with the pace of change. I did my report recently, and we need to go further and faster.
Okay, talking about then your frustration, where and how does this lie in terms of bodies or people?
So at 10-year point, I produced a report that came out called the Future Generations Report, which is available on my website, which gives my assessment of where we've got to. And although I point to these really important changes, and it's very important to be positive because it is making a difference, I also point to where we're not on track. And we're not on track in terms of addressing long-term health trends. We're not on track to restore nature. We're not on track to meet some of our climate targets. So we need to be bolder and we need to keep focused on this long-term vision in order to get where we have the ambition to be.
Being quite direct, why are we not on track?
That's such a big question. There are so many issues there. First of all, these things are really difficult. They're not easy to do. You look at other countries and many of them are in similar positions. There have been issues around resources. So, we've had a time of austerity over the past, 10, 15 years, and that's affected the capacity of public bodies to deliver on some of this work. Sometimes we haven't been bold enough in terms of the issues that we need to take. Public bodies will also reference the fact that, they have short-term funding. And how can they put long-term plans in place? Well, some of these are, important considerations, but ultimately we can't accept them as reasons because we have no choice.
But why not?
We have to, because we have to.
Because they're valid reasons from what I could see. They got short-term funding. They've gone to shortism in terms of planning in terms of redundancy, potentially lack of resource. They're firefighting.
They are firefighting. I know, absolutely. But we have to find ways.
Yes.
We have to find ways through this. There's not a day that's going to come in the next few years where suddenly we've got plenty of money and everything's going to be fine, and then we can start to look at the nature emergency, or then we can deal with long-term health trends. We have to find ways of doing it in the here and now, because we know if we wait, these problems will get more difficult to deal with and more expensive. So, we need to recognise the challenge. And I very much pitched my role as being alongside our public sector bodies, understanding the challenges that they face and working with them to find the solutions. So recognizing where we're at, but that doesn't mean we don't do anything. We've just got to find ways through it.
What ways can you suggest? So just say you're a local authority struggling with budgetary controls, cutbacks, headcount gone, and then you're still expected to perform as you would at any other time. What do they do in this situation?
Well, it depends on the issue. There's many different solutions to this. Yeah. I mean, this doesn't necessarily have to cost more money. One of the easiest, things to criticise about this agenda is, we need to focus on the now rather than the long term. But actually, that's a false dichotomy. Okay. This can be, more cost effective, as I've been saying, if we look at the long term and the now. So if you, for example, if you look at a local hospital that I know about, brand new, in a few years of it opening, it has to be extended. Now that's going to cost more money, having to do things later than doing it first time and getting it right. As I've said, if we do things now, we can save money for the future. If we carry on like we are, for example, with our health trends, then we are going to, the NHS is going to be unsustainable. So, we have to find ways in the here and now, and there are solutions. My report points to many of them, shows examples where many public sector organisations in Wales are really making an impact. Okay. We just need to, we need to implement more of them and do that more widely.
Can you give us some solutions in those kind of situations? I think a big part in Wales right now is funding. And even though someone might say, obviously, that doesn't hold you back, it holds you back in terms of resource and capability within an organisation.
Of course.
Maybe for a short period, but that goes to people going back to, okay, let's just do what we need to do to function as an organisation, the basic here and now, then thinking long term. And to be quite honest with you, I don't think people are against the Wellbeing and Future Generation Act. I think I'd find it hard for people to be against it. So how do they implement it in the here and now when they're firefighting?
Well, this is when we need to implement it. It's not something we can delay for the reasons that I've given to you. I completely get that. I'm not undermining or negating the challenges that public sector organisations are facing. Absolutely, I see this day in, day out in this role. But this is as much about cultural change as about anything else. It's not about, right, we'll do the now and then we'll do the long term later. It's about doing them both in the same time, thinking long term. And if you don't have that sort of mindset of thinking long term whilst you're also taking decisions today, you won't find the solutions that are right for the future and for today.
I agree with you what you've said in terms of culture and mindset. I think culture is something that we could often take for granted. It's so deeply embedded within organisations. But this is something that makes things change in certain ways. If the culture isn't there, you could have all the processes in place. Yeah. You could even have the funding in place. But it may not get implemented to the level that we want because the mindset isn't there. If an organisation is struggling with culture, what support do you provide them with?
Yeah, so this is one of the areas where we provide some support. I mean, cultural change is a big thing. It's not something that an organisation would just come to us and sort. But the culture change that we support really is around the 5 ways of working, as I was talking about. Those 5 ways of working are the cultures and the behaviours that we expect our public bodies to provide. And through my offices, but also through Welsh Government offices and elsewhere, we provide sort of support and training around how you sort of embed good practice in implementing those ways of working. We've also got something called the Ways of Working Journey Checker, which is a great tool. So public bodies can do a self-assessment exercise and they can go through the tool and they can look at where they are in terms of delivering on those 5 ways of working, and that tool gives them advice on if you want to get to the next stage, which we hope you do, this is the type of thing we'd expect you to be delivering.
That's reassuring to hear because sustainability, I explained to my viewers, is not a destination, it's a journey.
Yes.
You're not going to just get over there. The full journey has to be completed, which means getting everyone on the boat, following the processes, making sure the mindset shift is here, and then moving along, checking where you are, checking in with other people as well to see where they are and going down that road. Can you give us some examples of really good practice of people implementing this?
Yeah, well, I gave you some examples before. I guess in the health service, for example, an example that I cite regularly is where Morriston Hospital in Swansea, they put in place a solar farm to support their energy needs in the hospital, and they did that pre-COVID, and that's saving them lots of money as a result of that solar farm, and they perhaps wouldn't have done that without the
Who
legislation.
funded that? Because solar farms are quite expensive from the outset. Long term, they're absolutely fantastic, but
Well, isn't that a good reason to do it?
no,
Because you save money in the long
I
term.
completely agree with you. Just getting that money up front or a scheme in place to be able to spread it across X amount of years. It's like having a loan, really, to implement things.
Yeah. In that case, I think it was an example of Welsh Government funding specifically for
Okay.
that, which made it easier because the challenge I remember them getting actually at the time on the news was, well, we've got this queue of ambulances and these waiting lists. Why are you spending money on a solar farm?
Yeah.
But they were able to say this is hypothecated funding. This could only be used for this purpose. But now patients are benefiting because energy bills are cheaper as a result of that.
But that in mind, isn't that a suggestion to say there should be more schemes available, whether it's from Welsh Government or the Development Agency, or Development Bank? There should be more available to people and organisations to support them through this transition.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that goes without saying. Of course, we need to find ways of giving more support to public bodies to implement it. And if streams of funding are available, dedicated to tasks or initiatives that are very aligned to the legislation, that of course that's going to be helpful. Yeah.
So I saw a recent briefing where you mentioned quite directly, everyone's got the tools, go and get on with their job.
I didn't quite say it like that, but
along the lines.
something like that. Yeah.
Okay, say in your own words.
Well, what my report says and my strategy, Cymru Can, says is, we've got many of the solutions. We need to implement them. That's easier said than done. I recognise that, but it's about creating a positive mindset.
Yeah.
This isn't. It can feel very overwhelming. Some of this, the long-term challenges that we face, the instability in the real world, can feel. I think can get on top of people and can mean, oh, we can't do anything because we're just a small player and there's so much else going on that we can't control. And the narrative, and I guess the sort of message that I've been trying to get across, and what I see all the time is, we see brilliant stuff going on right across Wales, and it's just encouraging people to do more of them, pointing to the best practice examples and the good practice examples that others can do the same, urging a sense of positive change. I just think that's really important because if we don't have that sense, change is going to happen.
Change happens every day. And I think this is something that people need to accept. And I'm not ready for change. Well, it's changing around you. Every day is change. It's a case of how you embrace it and move with the change than thinking inertia is going to kick in or resistance, because it's going to happen one way or another.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's going to happen one way or the other. And if we don't act, it's, some of it's going to be harder,
yes,
more difficult or more negative. So it's about working towards a more positive future. And I think going back to this involvement post, it's also giving people agency over that, giving people a say over the decisions that take place.
I think there's an element of, if someone feels part of the process or feel owner within the process, decision maker, is more likely to succeed than being told, okay, here's a legislation, get on with it, and this is how it's going to all work. I think Wales has done a fantastic job with that. More recently, I went to a school, so I was in the school with the primary school students, and we're talking about sustainability.
Right.
So as we went through certain things, I was taken back how much pupils, they're 8 to 10 years old, how much they knew about the nature, sustainability, goals in Wales, across the world. I was taken back because
they know well about the wellbeing goals?
They knew the basic framework, and it's very important for them to follow.
Yes.
And they had eco warriors,
yes,
things that we didn't have in our time. So
yes.
I was taken back, and I felt quite proud in that moment, thinking actually, there's hope here. This is how they view certain things. And my session went on to talk about fast fashion. They knew what fast fashion was, why it's important not to just buy cheap, buy whatever you want, not consider where it's come from. And these are 8 to 10-year-olds.
Yeah, yeah.
So
that's inspiring, isn't it? Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah.
So that was a primary school in Cardiff. And I think that might be also the impact of the curriculum, because they were able to talk about the nature garden, eco warriors. I'm thinking some of this, though we had the nature garden when we were in primary school, not to that kind of level. But I guess the movement for sustainability and the climate crisis has also in the last 10 to 15 years gone at rapid pace. So with that, there's obviously good work that's coming out of Wales to sort of combat some of the issues we're having. In terms of your role as Commissioner, what do you think is your main priority right now?
Well, I've got 5 missions.
Oh.
So if you forgive me, I'll give you all 5.
Please do.
So I've got 5 missions that I set myself. One is around health, the long-term health trends. I mean, I could work full-time, obviously, on any one of these, but my job is not, is support our public bodies. So one is around health and well-being and the long-term health trends we're facing. One is around climate and nature.
Yes.
Huge, of course, and meeting our targets in that respect. A third one is around the economy and how the economy works, a well-being economy, which is what the legislation is requiring us to work towards. A fourth one is around culture and the Welsh language. Culture very much facing a bit of a crisis in terms of its funding in Wales. So how do we safeguard our culture for future generations? And then the fifth one is implementation and impact, which you might say, oh, of course, but this is about making the mechanics of the the processes work. How we having good well-being objectives. How are we measuring their success? Are we making sure the implementation is happening? Is the collaboration working through the PSBs that I mentioned? So those are my 5 mission areas, and I didn't just come up with them. We did a lot of work, as you'd hope, to involve people in deciding where I should put my focus, looking at long-term trends information for Wales and globally, and putting together this plan for my time in the role. Okay.
And what is the parameters for these goals that you have? Have you got a set time you want them reached by?
Do you mean your missions? So I only have 5 years left in the role. So the commissioner is a 7-year post, and I've got 5 years left to run. And so I set myself some key performance indicators to measure my success in delivering on those 5 missions. Yeah.
Okay. And with the overarching framework, you're also holding other people accountable. You mentioned Welsh Government, other bodies. In cases where people are not living to the spirit of the legislation, how do you hold them accountable? What do you do?
It's a great question, and one I get asked regularly. Mostly the role is more carrot than stick. Okay. So you're there to sort of advise. You're there to monitor progress, which is not an easy thing to do, given we've got so many public bodies and they go in, different measures of success and so forth. And you also have something called a review power, an investigation power to go in and look at a particular issue, and public bodies are obliged to take part in that discussion. But I think it's a really good question, because at 10-year anniversary of the legislation, we need to think about what's worked and what we might improve upon. And one of the things I think people are frustrated with is not necessarily my powers, but it's their own powers as individuals or communities to be able to challenge their public bodies and say, the decision or the action you're taking there is not in line, or it's not sufficient to deliver on our wellbeing goals, and we'd like you to change course. So actually, that's very difficult under the legislation and the way it's drafted for individuals to do that, and I think that's something we should look to strengthen. How we build in a sense of being able to properly hold public bodies to accountable. But I can, calling out, giving advice. These are not insignificant powers that I have too.
Okay, now taking a step back and looking at the fact that obviously this is legislation. Legislation very much in the UK and internationally is about rules, people not following rules, enforcement. Are we actually saying we have legislation that cannot enforce certain things? Is that what we're saying? It's a weak legislation. It should operate on policy level.
No, that's not what I'm saying. It's framework legislation.
Yes.
So it was deliberately written this way. This wasn't done by accident. They didn't think, oh, we should have done it in a different way. It was done in a thoughtful way.
Yeah.
This was done as a framework legislation to say this is the direction we want our public bodies to go in. And this is the behaviours I keep talking about that we expect them to deliver. And these are the processes that we are going to follow. And this is how we, scrutinise that delivery and monitor progress. So it was deliberately done in that way. It wasn't meant to be, all about the stick because, my experience is that's not often the way we make change happen. But I think 10 years on, it's healthy to look back and say, maybe we need less process here and more focus on outcomes. We need more alignment with our public bodies so they're not all, they're not having lots of different objectives. There's certainly value in that scrutiny, yeah.
If you could change something about that legislation, what is the one thing you would change?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that I would change is to get a much stronger link between the goals, the indicators, and the well-being objectives. So at the moment, public bodies they put in well-being objectives in place, and they can be very different depending on the public body, and it's not always clear to show how that objective is meeting those 7 goals and how it's going to improve our performance against the 50 indicators. So making a much better link between all of that would make it stronger, I think.
How could that happen then, making that stronger link? Is that just more work that needs to be done to fill in the gaps?
Well, I think more direction through the legislation potentially, or more direction through the guidance that Welsh Government produces to make sure there's much better alignment. Because this is all about us working on a collective journey here, isn't it?
Yes.
We all want to go forward to this collective vision. Like a company might have, Wales has a vision for the country, which many countries don't have, a long-term vision for the country. So if we're going to get there, we need to be aligned, pulling in the same direction. Yeah. And I think at the moment it's too loosely drawn. That means people can, go slightly different directions. We want flexibility, but we also want that sort of alignment to the central vision and mission we have.
How long do you think that might take?
What might take?
The alignment process.
Well, if we wanted to change legislation, that's not going to happen in this Senedd. I mean, we've got elections here next year, so that would be something that would take place in the next Senedd, and that would be up to the next government to decide on how they change that legislation.
So we're speaking obviously of a 10-year span of the legislation. If we start early on, I was in the background, by the way, with the previous commission as the transition was happening. So I know there's a lot of talk on how we frame it, and you don't want to be too harsh because you want people to buy into it and feel part of the process. Yes. And then obviously we had the first commissioner, and then you obviously have come in, 2 years ago. How has that 10-year period been quite different in terms of the previous commissioner and yourself? What kind of style have you used as opposed to the previous commissioner? What was her role as opposed to your role?
Yeah, there were different phases, I guess. Yeah. So the first commissioner has a 7-year term. I will have a 7-year term, and very much in the first phase of the legislation, it was setting things up, putting the advice in place, raising awareness amongst public bodies and the public more generally about the legislation, what its purpose was, and how we were expecting it to be delivered. Some significant changes were made in that time, and successes were made. And I've come in, and we're over that first phase now. We've very much got to focus on delivery and implementation. Someone described my role as the difficult second album. And which I thought was a nice description, because we have to make sure we're getting on with the delivery.
Yes.
And we have this implementation gap in Wales and maybe in the UK, where we have lofty ambitions, important ambitions. We must hold on to those. But also we've got to make sure we deliver on those ambitions. And my job is to support our public bodies to deliver on them.
The way I saw the first commission, so Sophie Howe's role, was to start beating the drums, getting people to listen to what's happening, grab people's attention, win hearts and minds. And you're very right to say, now you've come and go, actually, we need the progress to happen. So I like the phrase that you use, the second album.
Yeah. It can feel a bit like that. I mean, there's a lot of continuity as well. You know, you come in and we want to achieve the same things. We're here with the same mission, but we different phases require different approaches. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a bit of a direct question here, and it's a bit of a sensitive point, but from working around and speaking to people in the public sector over the years, there's a certain perception of the previous commission and her style of working as opposed to the new commission. How do you differ as opposed to the previous commission's style of working?
Oh, God, you'd have to ask other people in that sense. I think when I came in, I set myself, 5 areas of focus. So they're different from the previous commissioner. Yes. So that, those 5 missions are different. So that's one of the ways in which, we've taken a different approach. I think the other key way is something I've mentioned previously on this podcast, on this discussion, is that, the first phase was different from the second phase in some senses, and I'm really focused on implementation and impact and delivery and being alongside public bodies, listening to them, understanding what the challenges are and trying to unblock obstacles and making sure we deliver.
That's really reassuring to hear, because I think that's where public sector is. They want that support around to move things forward and guide them through as well.
Yeah, I think that's right as well. And you said, I think, in an earlier point, how supportive people are. And this is something that I've said in a recent report as well. If you speak to leaders, public bodies, or people working in public sector organisations in Wales, where they have awareness, the leaders certainly will, but not everyone working in a public sector body will, people get this. They're supportive. They understand why we have this agenda. They're proud of the fact that we've got this pioneering legislation. So there's a lot of goodwill. But that doesn't make it easy. We've still got to find a solution.
It's that implementation part.
Yeah.
Now looking at the legislation, the framework, obviously this looks at the public sector and certain public bodies that are funded in that way. But within Wales, we have other organisations, our government organisation. I think you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
So we have the likes of the BBC. We have HMRC. We have other bodies from central government that sit within Wales, that impact Wales, that hire from Wales, but they're not captured in the legislation. What are your thoughts on that? Really, the Wales we want wants everyone on this journey.
I agree totally with that, because it's not just public sector organisations, non-devolved public sector organisations, it's private businesses as well, it's charities and third sector organisations too. So, we're not going to get where we need to go unless everyone's on board. So even though the legislation applies just to the public sector or the devolved public sector, we need everyone to get on board. And that's why it's great when you see organisations like Principality Building Society who have, they've got a Future Generations Fund, which supports third sector organisations to deliver on projects aligned to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. You see other businesses like Castell Howell as well doing similar things, So many businesses get on board even though they're not required to do so, and recognise that this is, is part of our mission as a country and is part of how we want to do things. And I did this previously. So I was a chief executive previously of a third sector organisation called Compass, a development agency in the third sector. And, we aligned what we were doing to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, because we thought this is an important thing for Wales and we want to play our role.
So that's voluntarily, but if an organisation makes a huge impact, and they're a public organisation, they're just not governed within here, so central government, the examples I've given, is there not a way to encapsulate them within this legislation?
They're not formally caught under the legislation, no. So the legislation would need to be changed if government wanted to do that. But I think, the speaking to public bodies and, encouraging them to align is one way that you could seek to do this. I mean, the other thing to do would be for the UK to take an approach where they had similar legislation, and there has been some interest in Scotland, in Northern Ireland in particular, but also at Westminster for taking, a similar approach across the UK or in the other devolved nations, and that would be great because, we don't want to be just doing this on our own. We want to, everyone needs to be acting in this way if we're going to really change things globally.
I think there's a lot other places in the world and within the UK that can learn from Wales. There's so much good practice here. But now flipping the other way around, what can Wales learn from other places?
Oh, so much.
Okay.
So much. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the approach that we need to take is a proud but humble one in Wales. We're proud of the approach we're taking, but humble about the fact that we've got so much to learn and so much more to do. And there's so much good practice around, the UK and elsewhere in terms of how we do things. So we've got lots to learn. I mean, you just need to go to other countries and see how they're sustainable, their public transport systems are, and how much more sustainable they are there than they are in the UK. Well, we can learn from that. Similarly, you can look at health systems and see how public health and long-term health trends are better tackled in other countries. So there's so much learning from all around the world. We need to be outward-looking to learn from that and bring that back to Wales and make a difference here.
That's reassuring to hear. So in terms of yourself being commissioner for the last 2 years, I was really excited. I heard a bit about you when you become commissioner. What made you apply for the role?
Oh, that's a great question. What an amazing opportunity this is. This is such a privilege to do a job like this, to be a guardian of the interests of future generations, to be able to influence important long-term decisions in the country where I was born. It was a hugely attractive opportunity to apply for the role. And I guess secondly, I thought I had something to offer. I'd worked in the space of social enterprise and inclusion, digital inclusion, so understanding how you have a fairer economy, looking at how you support, the inclusion of people from different backgrounds in public services. I'd previously worked in local government as well, so I'd understood how public bodies work. So I thought I had some good experience and skills to be able to bring to the role. But, I was so proud and so happy to get the job, yeah.
I think you covered my point. How did you feel when you got appointed?
Oh, yeah, well, so pleased, excited, I guess nervous about the role, because it's a different kind of role.
It's a very unique role. There's only one person that has this role.
Yeah, exactly. So, so there's a lot of attention given to the role internationally and in Wales. And you always want to do the best, don't you? Of course, you want to make an impact. I think one of the nice things about the role, one of the clever things about the role is the 7-year period.
Yes.
Because you can't be reappointed. So, you're not looking for reappointment.
There's no election for you.
No election or no reappointment process in this case. So you work really hard, you do your best. There's going to be an end point. So, do as much as you can in that time period. I think
that's good for Wales, but also for you, because you have your remit. You go, this is what I want to do with my commission, and this is my time span I have.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it makes you impatient to get that change happening in the time period that you've got. And also, it 7 years is a nice time period, so it takes you over a Senedd term. Exactly. So, you can, it's not too long and it's not too short. So I think it gives you that a good amount of time to be able to really get your teeth stuck into it.
That's good to hear. So with the legislation, it's called the Future Generations legislation, but we also look at the current generation.
Yes.
How do we balance their needs?
Well, that's a great question, because we really talk about the acting now for a better tomorrow. So it's not about ignoring the concerns of people today, just to think about our children and our grandchildren. It's about doing the both at the same time. So that's very much at the heart of this approach. Doing
both at the same time, I imagine there's tension there. If someone says, as someone that's around here right now, I can't do X, Y, Z because we're looking after future generations. How do you weigh that up for someone that in that position?
Yeah, I think that is sometimes the challenge, and it will depend on the issue. I think probably how you respond to that. One of the points that I would make is it's not always an either or. Often it's not. In fact, it's a both, but it's having that frame of mind to think, what is the right thing for the next 25 years, and how can we also do the right thing for the here and now. So, let me give you an example. Acting on the food system,
Yes.
for example, is one of the areas that I'm working on. It's not a specific one of the 5 missions, but it cuts across them. Working on the food system, if we're having healthier diets now, if we're having better food in our schools and in our hospitals and in our prisons.
They might not like the greens, but they're good for them.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But if that's also healthy food, but that's locally produced food and that's organic food, that's going to be better for our economy now. That's going to be better for our farmer incomes. Hopefully, if we have healthy food, it's going to be better for our nature and our climate because we're not importing as much. But that's also going to be better for the long term, isn't it? Because we're not going to be healthier further down the line. We're not going to have as many impacts on our health service and the costs to our NHS. So, there are win-wins here.
There are quite a few win-wins. And I like the way you framed, actually, there's long-term benefits, but those benefits right now as well.
Yeah.
And the whole ecosystem that you bring together, saying, actually, buying local, you have to support the local economy.
Yeah.
You're supporting a system that's around you, delivery miles, and what I also say, it gives an option to be resilient. What COVID taught us is overnight we could have borders cut. Yeah. That means if we don't have something here in terms of economy or ecosystem, we might be in a situation where actually we buy everything from abroad or X percentage from abroad. Now we can't do this in this situation. What do we do?
Yeah.
So it makes us as economy be resilient long term as well. So imagine what you're going to talk about is the long-term ecosystem locally and regionally within Wales that you're trying to build. Has everyone been quite welcoming to that?
In terms of food in particular?
Yes, food.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is exactly the way we framed it, looking at resilience, not just in terms of, trade barriers, but climate change, potential of war and so forth, means that our food systems need, the word you're using, I think is great, is a resilient food system. We need to be able to plan for that. And that means having more of our home produced food and being able to, make sure that is there in times of change. And there's been a lot of support for that, a lot of support from lots of different interest groups recognizing that, the current system is not sustainable and we need to change it.
Yeah. That's reassuring to hear, because in some sense, then that means people are living by the value of collaborative. Work collaboratively, long term. So it's good to see in practice it's actually filtering through as well. One thing I've struggled with when reading the Future Generations work, and I might imagine you also struggle with this, is that the future generation, many of them are not born yet.
Yes.
So how do we fully know what they need and how that world will look like for them? And we're all, whether it's yourself or someone just thinking, I want a better planet for people, my grandchildren, people, we might be thinking from our viewpoint, naturally the environment's making sure it's safe, but for the world to be a better place and also the best for the future generation, what do they need?
Yeah.
Beyond what we know, because really we're talking from our framework of what we understand and the climate crisis that we're dealing with, other issues that we're dealing with, thinking, okay, we don't want to leave the environment in this state. It would be unfair, immoral, illogical, and we want a better place for them, which is fine. But there might be more they want. How do we know?
Well, it's a great question because by definition, future generations are not here yet. We can't ask them. These are people not yet born and we're acting in their interests. I think what we can do, though, is we can look at future trends.
Yes.
And we can see where these trends are going to take us if we don't act and take judgments on what is going to be in the interests of our children and our grandchildren. And we act on those those future trends. I think that's really important. This is not about being Mystic Meg and having
How is the world going to look in 30 years' time? I have to fit this round.
Exactly. We've got data. We know where a lot of things are going to end up if we carry on as we are. So we can use that information. But I also think whilst this is all of our agenda, all generations, my generation and younger generations, I think one of the things I've tried to focus on is also involving young people in this, because they're going to have longer term time on this planet than I'm going to have, and often they will have this longer term perspective. So hearing from them, understanding what matters to them, and acting on that is key. So I run a Future Generations Leadership Academy, which brings young people together from across Wales to learn about the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, to act on putting plans in place in their workplaces and make a difference. And that's one way in which I hear from young people and support young people to implement this agenda.
Could you give us more information about this academy and how it operates? Do people meet regularly? Is it a touch point you have at a certain point in the year?
Yeah, so it's an 8 or 9 month program. Starts in September, and
conveniently academic year.
Academic year, yeah. And so we have about 30 or 40 people on each cohort at the moment. And
how do you find them, or how do they find you?
Well, in a mix of ways. So in order to run the program, I rely on sponsorship because I don't have a big budget. So businesses or public body organisations will sponsor somebody in their team to go on the program. So they might have a young person working with them, an under 30, and they will put them forward to be on the program, and they'll sponsor a place for them on the program. And then some organisations will put some money in for someone in their team, but they'll give a bit more, which enables me to have an open recruitment process. So those people who are maybe not in employment or not with an employer that can afford to sponsor them, they can apply through the open process, and we have a recruitment process to bring those on as well. So Principality, for example, is that they give more than they for one place, and they help support this open recruitment process.
So what have they said they want then? The people in the academy, obviously we're learning from them through the process. What are they saying in terms of the future they want for Wales?
Well, this is recognised in my missions. So I listen to them quite carefully in choosing my work programme. So the things that matter to them are the things that matter to me and are reflected in my mission. So the work I'm doing on climate and nature, and making challenging Welsh Government to improve the quality of our rivers, and giving advice on how that happened. Those are the sorts of things that young people talk about. The food system, young people talk about that as well. That the health of our nation for the long term. These are all the issues that have framed Cymru Can, which is my strategy.
Yeah. So that's that generation. How do those viewpoints differ from the older generation?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I sense more positivity from the younger generation about the possibility of change.
So could we say they run with hope over fear, which I often use?
Right, yeah, I've not heard that expression. But no, it's not just hope. It's I think it's and it's practical too. It's about wanting to deliver on things, So I think there's more of that. There's certainly more, I would say, more support and interest on things like climate and nature, perhaps, than an older generation. But that, I don't want to...
It's a generational thing.
Maybe it's a generational thing, but I don't want to be too cut and dried about that, because, of course, people of my age and older, passionate about having, tackling climate change and nature. So these are generalizations that are probably not fair to many people, but yeah.
Well, I do think social media has played its own part in terms of making the world a smaller place. When I meet some of the younger generation, they know a lot and have a lot of content from online, and they can throw figures and facts at me. I'm thinking, I didn't know this. Well, I saw it on TikTok.
Yes.
So how is the Commission sort of working around in terms of catering for the current and future generation around how they operate? Because I know you're quite active on social media as a Commission. Are you across a few different platforms at the moment?
Yeah, we work across different platforms and we do our best to produce engaging content. And we are very conscious of the fact that we just don't want to be speaking to ourselves, but we don't want to just be speaking to people who are already on board with this.
Yeah.
We want to reach out beyond that. And that's obviously quite challenging to do so. But I'm very lucky I've got a talented team, a skilled team who can think about some quality content that can reach out beyond, the bubble of people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
With the team, how are they carved up in terms of the kind of work they work on?
So we structure the organisation by missions. Yeah. So largely people are in mission teams. They're delivering on the 5 different missions. But we also try and, demonstrate good practice. So we integrate that as well. So people work, not just in their silos, but they work on cross-organisational issues, such as food or working with other mission areas as well. So they're not just working in their closed teams. It's a much more fluid setup than that. And then we have within that we have comms specialists, we have policy specialists, we have advisors, and our advisors often act as the key link to the public bodies. So as I keep saying, we want to really be alongside public bodies, and so they will be linked into particular public bodies so that we know what's going on for them, we hear from them, we can communicate with them.
I like that frame that you use there, working alongside them. So is it more the carrot than the stick?
Yeah.
Being I assume the critical friend at times.
Yeah.
But learning from them, but learning with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's one way of implementing, getting people on board, so they actually see, actually, if I have a problem, potentially I have a connection here, I could call them up and get some guidance and understand what's happening. Because otherwise, I imagine there's people going to be quite scared about how they approach this legislation. But it's good to know that you have your eyes and ears on the ground to some level.
Yeah, and that's really important to us. And we get, I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but we get many contacts, and that's increasing. And in some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad. We're deliberately wanting to be close to them. We want to be trusted advisors. We want them to ask our advice. We want them to come to us. But we also want to get to the point where, people have got the skills in their own organisations and their capabilities, and they have their centres of expertise as well. So it's really important that we have that close relationship.
If you have so many inquiries directed at you, people reaching out, how do you work through what you prioritise and what you don't prioritise? Because I imagine that's a daily issue here.
It's a daily issue. We're a small team and it's a big agenda. I mean, everything is in scope of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So it's a big agenda. I mean, we try to be intelligent about how we do this. So, for example, we recognise that we're limited in the amount of one-to-one advice that we can give. Now, we do that. But what we've tried to move is to more of a peer-to-peer or a one-to-many kind of model, so that we're providing, advice to a number of public bodies at the same time who are interested in the same issue, rather than just one-to-one, because that's more efficient. But also, I think it works better because the public bodies can learn from themselves.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can facilitate that, and we're one of the, I guess, few-ish organisations. Yeah, there's others as well, but that have this overview of public sector bodies in Wales. So we can, we're not just working in health, we're working local authorities and in nature, we're working national parks where, we can see spot what's going on over there, and we can connect organisations that might not ordinarily be working together or not be working, in the same groups.
Yeah. I guess the way you framed it, really have an overarching framework where you could see what's happening, and they might not be able to, but connecting the dots for them to help them along the way. I think that's a role of, in some sense, a guardian, where you're able to sort of look forward, but look across as well for them.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's an important part of the role.
The other thing I'd like to cover is a couple of questions. This is specifically on your role and the Commission. They're more quick-fire questions before I get into the full quick-fire questions.
Right. Goodness, okay.
So So, as the commissioner, if you could change one thing, what one thing would you change?
In my role as commissioner?
Yes.
That's a great question. There are so many things that I would want to change. I would want to ensure all of our public sector organisations are focused on delivering on this agenda and successfully doing so. Yeah.
What's the best thing about your job? Best part of your job?
Oh, it's going to be a cliche, but probably the people.
Oh,
I work with a great team. I meet amazing people day in, day out in different areas of work, and they can be inspirational. And that's fantastic. The breadth of this role, the ability to, work with a great team and meet people from lots of different walks of life is a real privilege.
Okay. Now, on the flip side, what's the worst part of your job?
What's the worst part of my job? Yeah, I guess it's, you're here as a commissioner advocating for change, advising for change, but you're not directly able to deliver you don't have a big budget. You're not responsible for delivering the health service or delivering services or, delivering action on climate change. You're there independent of that. So, having that, you sometimes of course you want to get involved. You want to get
your teeth into it.
but you're on the outside of that. You're independent of that, and I guess that's important to recognise that space. It's a frustration, I guess, but it's also it's a positive thing in how things have set up. Yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of viewpoints, how do you think you're perceived as the commissioner? So not just you as a commissioner role. How do you think other public bodies look at you in one sentence?
The commissioner role, or me as a commissioner?
Why don't we do both?
Oh, set myself up for that. I mean, you'll have to ask them, I guess, in terms of their perceptions. And I think that is one thing I'm conscious to improve our understanding on. We get great feedback on terms of the advice we provide as an office, so that's always positive. But we need to hear more about what more we can do. So you're probably best place to ask them. The only evidence I can go on is the feedback that we ask for and that we get in terms of the advice we provide, and that's always very positive. Well, usually very positive. I guess there are always areas where we get criticism, but we get a lot of positive responses about the quality of advice from the team and the expertise of the team, which is great.
Okay.
I dodged the question a bit there.
You did. I'll let you off for that one. So, in your 7 years commissioner, when it comes to the end, what is the one thing that you really want to have achieved by then? I imagine there's a list of many, but what is that one thing that your burning desire that you don't sleep at night thinking about that I really want to get done?
Well, I think that you can't say one thing. No, because you can't, because this isn't about action.
Yes.
This is about behaviour change.
Okay.
This is about delivering the legislation. So if I were to say, I want...
Derek, I think you're challenging me already.
Yeah. But if I were to say, I wanted, all of our, all our schools to be having healthy free school meals, that would just be one part of this picture. If I was to say, we were all to public bodies to meet their net zero targets by 2030, that would be important too. But you want progress across the piece.
Yeah.
It's all about this integrated approach. It's not specific actions, it's ways of behaving. And what I want to see, we've got these measures of success, and I want to have seen progress in delivering on those national indicators. And for me, my role is to support our public bodies to make that progress.
I think you've answered that perfectly.
Great, okay, I'm glad.
One final question about the commissioner role is, what do you want to be remembered for?
Impact.
Impact.
Change. Yeah. You want to have been there and made a difference. Seen the dial change. What's the...
Moving of the dial.
Yeah, moving of the dial. A step change in terms of our delivery. It's great to talk about how good the legislation is and how much interest we get. But what really needs to happen is we need to make sure that it's continuing to make impact for today and for the long term.
Okay, we've got to know the commissioner. I want to now just get to know you.
Right.
So tell me something about yourself that we don't know, that we don't see on the TV, we don't see in interviews.
What? That's a great question.
Let us into the secret.
There is no secret. I've got a great family.
Yes.
I've got 2 children, grown-up children, which is fantastic. And I guess one of the things I'm challenging myself at the moment is to get fitter.
Okay.
So I'm not a cyclist, but I'm doing a bit of cycling at the moment in order to get better. It's not something I've done anything of in my previous life. I cycle around Cardiff all the time, but I don't do long distance cycling.
Yeah.
So
I remember we did an event together about 2 years ago, and you're like, I'm going to get my cycle straight after this event.
Yeah. So I do cycle around, but I don't do long distances. I live in Cardiff, and and I cycle around Cardiff, and
Cardiff's big enough as it is.
It's pretty big,
Yeah, it's
but
pretty
it's
big.
flat. This is going to be hilly.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm practicing for that.
What is your favourite food?
Thai food, I think.
Thai food.
I love Thai food.
Any specific dish?
I love pad Thai.
I like pad
I'm
Thai.
mostly vegetarian. I eat some fish.
Okay.
So
sustainably then.
yeah, trying to do that. And but I was pretty much vegetarian, well before this role. And so Thai food, you can have lots of delicious Thai food that's vegetarian, or with some fish. So I love it. Yeah.
Okay. If you weren't commissioner, what role would you have right now? In an ideal world, you'd have any role. You go, number 10, I'm coming for you.
I don't know. I loved the job I was doing. I loved working in the third sector. So I would probably be working somewhere in the charity sector, in the third sector, on an issue that I cared about. So I've been lucky enough to be able to go from jobs that I'm interested in, that I'm passionate about. I worked at Stonewall, I worked at the TUC, I worked, as I said, at Compass. I've been able to do jobs that I really care about, that are about creating positive change. So I'd be doing something like that, probably in sustainability somewhere in the third sector.
Okay. This brings us towards the end of the podcast. So towards the end of each podcast, I have a question from our previous guest. So our previous guest was Stephanie Boyce. She made British history, become the first person of colour to take the presidential seat in the Law Society for England and Wales. So her question, quite fitting for you as well.
All right.
I have it here. So what characteristics makes a great leader and why?
What a great question. Well, I guess when you look at some great leaders, I think what I see in great leadership is sort of, boldness, some clarity of direction. So you understand where that leader wants to go. You understand why that leader wants to go there. And I think I've always appreciated leaders when I've been working as people who are collaborative in their approach. So they're not just standing at the front and saying we're all going in that direction, but they're involving people in deciding on what that direction is and how you get there. And I valued that when I've been, when I've seen leadership in others, and I've tried to model some of that myself.
Why do you think there's important characteristics?
Why are those characteristics important? I think because they get stuff done. They bring people with
action and impact. Going back to
action and impact. Yeah, they bring people with you, and you need. There's no point in having a sort of sense of where you're going if no one's on the journey. You also need to explain the why.
Yeah.
Why are we going? What's it going to result in? And that can be motivating. So that sort of charisma, that communication, that clear sense of direction, I think, is important too. Yeah.
Thank you. Brilliant. So we'll come to the end of the podcast. Now it's your turn to ask the next guest a question. You're welcome to write your question down here.
Right. I will write my question down and then leave it to you to ask the next person when they can. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on to this podcast, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I can imagine right now, 10 years into the legislation, there's a lot happening at the moment. So thank you for your time. Thank you for everyone listening in.